today we are working on section 8.1, and here I have it titled Special Right Triangles. Online on your homework it does also include Pythagorean theorem, but we've worked with that several times, and you guys had an assignment yesterday to work on that. So today we are just focusing on special right triangles. Alright, so there are two types of special right triangles. The first one we are going to work with is the 45, 45, 90. Alright, this is because if we have a 90-degree angle, we've got 45 and 45. This makes us this an isosceles triangle, so these two legs are the same. Alright, so there's something special, of course, special right triangles. There's something special about this type of triangle. If we have a measurement for the leg, we can take that measurement and multiply it by the square root of 2 in order to get your hypotenuse. Remember, your hypotenuse is always across from that right angle. So if you are going from leg to hypotenuse, you're going to multiply by the square root of 2. If you have your hypotenuse and you are going to your leg, you are going to do the opposite. You're going to divide by the square root of 2. Okay, remember it is a square root of 2, not just 2. So we have several examples that we're going to look at today. So first, if I am looking at this first example of triangle XYZ, here is my right angle. So that makes this my hypotenuse over here. So the quick and easy one is XZ is my other leg. Okay, so since these two are my legs, XZ has to be 7 because it is the same as XY. In order to go from your leg to hypotenuse, remember up here, leg to hypotenuse is times the square root of 2. So I just take my 7 and we multiply that by the square root of 2, and really there is no simplifying that. Your answer is just 7 square root of 2, and that's it. Okay, so your other leg would be 7, your hypotenuse would be 7 square root of 2. All right, on our next example, we've got triangle JKL. Here we can see that we are starting with our hypotenuse, and we are going to our legs. And remember, our legs are the same, so whatever we get for one of our legs is going to be the same for the other. So we start with the length of our hypotenuse, and remember, to go from hypotenuse to leg, we are dividing by the square root of 2. So we are going to divide by the square root of 2. And the nice thing here is these just cancel right out. So JK is going to be 12, which means LK is also 12. All right, so these are just a few simple examples, and we'll look at more examples here in a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next type of special right triangles. This one is your 30, 60, 90. All right, this one is a little more complicated. So we have our hypotenuse, of course. Here's our hypotenuse. It is across from that right angle. Your 30-degree angle across from that tells us that we have our short leg here. And that's going to be really important. Okay, so here's our short leg, and then across from, here, let me make this a different color actually. Across from the 60 is your long leg. All right, this is very, very important. So our short leg is going to be X. So if I'm going from my short to my hypotenuse, this one's nice and simple. I just take that and I multiply by 2. Okay, so I'm just going to multiply by 2. My hypotenuse is 2x, or 2 times my short leg. Which means if I'm going from hypotenuse to short, I am going to divide by 2. Now, if I'm going from short to long, here we get x times the square root of 3. So short to long, you are going to multiply. Let me change that color. You're going to multiply by the square root of 3. And then from long to short, of course, it is just the opposite. Long to short, you're going to divide by the square root of 3. Okay, so very, very important that you determine which one you're starting with. And notice how each of these is based on your short. You go back and forth between long and short, or hypotenuse and short. You cannot go back and forth between long and hypotenuse. Okay, you always have to go to your short first before you can move on to another one. Okay, so let's look at this example. In our first example, we see that we have our short side. It's across from our 30-degree angle. So this is our short side. All right. Over here, PQ is going to be our long side. And then PR is going to be our hypotenuse. All right, so in order to go from my short to my long side, go up here, short to long, is multiplied by the square root of 3. So I have 6 times the square root of 3, and you can't simplify it any further. So 6 square root of 3 is the length of PQ. Okay, if I go to my hypotenuse, I go back to my short, which is 6. I'm multiplying that by 2. 6 times 2 is 12. So my hypotenuse is going to be 12. And that's it. All right, so for our next one, our next example, this time we are across from the 60 degrees. So that makes this my long side. Over here, since this is 30 degrees here, across would be my short, meaning UV is my short side. And then over here, of course, across from that 90-degree angle is my hypotenuse. So TV is going to be my hypotenuse. All right, so for the first one, I start with my long. Now I can't just jump to my hypotenuse. Remember up here, there's no just jumping from long to hypotenuse or hypotenuse to long. So I have to go to my short first. All right, so long to short. I take my long, and long to short is divided by square root of 3. And if we see here, these are nice and just cancel out. And so that means my short leg is 9. Now we are going to use this short leg down here to help us find our hypotenuse. Going from short to hypotenuse is multiply by 2. 9 times 2 gives us 18, so our hypotenuse is 18. All right. All right, so let's continue with some more examples. The rest of this is just several more examples that we're going to keep going through back and forth between our 45, 45, 90 and our 30, 60, 90. All right, so the first thing that you always want to do is determine which triangle it is that you're working with. So here I've got my 30. That means that this is a 30, 60, 90. All right. If I'm looking right here across from my across from that 90-degree angle makes this 10 my hypotenuse. Remember, I have to go to my short side first. Even though it's got AC listed first, that is my long side. Okay, so I have to find my short side first. So I'm going to have to find AB first. So to go from hypotenuse to short, I divide by 2, which gives me AB, which is 5. From here, I can go from my short to my long. 5 times the square root of 3, which really I don't even need to put that times sign. So 5 times the square root of 3, and that is your final answer. Our next example. All right, if we look at this, we actually have a square here, and we look at this diagonal. Okay, remember we talked about squares in the previous chapter, and that diagonal right there is going to take this angle and cut it in half, meaning we have a 45, 45, 90. So we want to find the side. Now, I've got 200 millimeters here. Okay, I want to go from my hypotenuse of my 45, 45, 90 to the leg. So hypotenuse to leg is to divide by the square root of 2. Now, there are two ways that you might see this. Okay, it might say, just give a rounded answer. Okay, if it says to just give a rounded answer, then you just do 200 divided by the square root of 2. Okay, you can just type that into your calculator, which I'm trying to do right now. All right, so we get approximately 141.4 millimeters. Okay, that's just rounded. 200 divided by square root of 2. Took me a little bit of a second because I had to actually type it into my phone calculator because I don't have my calculator on me. All right, now, it might ask you for an exact answer. All right, if it asks for an exact answer, remember this is approximate. This is an approximation. If it asks you for an exact answer, this is what you will do. You will do something called rationalizing the denominator. Okay, we are going to rationalize the denominator. If we look right here, square root of 2 is an irrational number. We don't want that in the denominator. So we are going to take this 200 divided by square root of 2, and we are going to multiply it by the square root of 2 over square root of 2. This is really just a fancy way of saying 1. It's a fancy way to multiply by 1. Okay? Anything over itself is going to equal 1. So we are just taking this number and we're making it look a little different. All right, so we get 200 square root of 2 on top. And then when we multiply these square roots, 2 times 2 gives us 4. Well, we know the square root of 4 is actually 2. So we get 200 square root of 2 over 2. And hey, we can simplify that. What's 200 divided by 2? 200 divided by 2 gives us 100 times the square root of 2. Okay, so I know that looks a little different. Okay, but 100 times the square root of 2 is the same as our approximation here of 141.4. The only difference is that this right here is an exact answer. And if your question asks you for an exact answer, that is what it wants you to do. All right? But of course, this is only if your square root is in the denominator. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this